Hi guys, welcome back to the show and this week's movie review. The Suicide Squad. Now, this actually marks the third in the newly established DC cinematic universe, and for most people, probably their most anticipated film of this cinematic universe, especially if you're a fan of the animated film that they released, The Assault on Arkham. To kind of see the Suicide Squad translated from animation into live action, which is pretty much the impression they gave us from the trailers that they set up originally, is something that you couldn't wait to see kind of realized on screen. So I'm a big fan of that film, and I'm not a super Suicide Squad person, but I did want to see how it was going to look like on screen. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about this movie. So let's start with the cast. So the cast is a long list of people. So many people that I'm going to try my best to name everybody that I can remember. So let's start with the big ones. It's going to have Will Smith, Margot Robbie, Joel Kinnaman, Viola Davis, Jai Courtney's in this film, which is great. It's Captain Boomerang, but we're also gonna get Cara Delevingne, Jared Leto, and I'm gonna stop there because I'm probably gonna forget other names. But it's a long list of people. I will try to remember to put them in the list of everybody else that I forgot. So that brings us to the plot. So the plot of this film is that they're actually setting up an expendable Black Ops team to kind of go out and do dangerous missions using villains, which is something new as far as seeing a superhero film, but not new to the comic book. And if you're a fan of the Suicide Squad comic book and the characters in the Suicide Squad, then this premise is nothing new to you. But for the people who aren't as familiar, or maybe who didn't see that animated film, it's a super awesome premise. And so they're going out on these dangerous missions they can't send superheroes out to go do, and they may not make it back. So I guess it kind of makes them some sort of Suicide Squad, as Will Smith would say in this film. But still a super awesome premise and something different that we've seen, and like I said, in superhero films thus far. So that's really going to take care of what the plot was set up as. Let's talk about what I did like and what I didn't like in this film, and the goods and the bad. So let's go ahead and start with the goods. So the goods of this film, I'm going to say the first thing right off the block is the soundtrack. The music in this movie is pretty awesome. So much that you could go out and buy the soundtrack of this film and just listen to that on its own and not even think about it being related to Suicide Squad. As a matter of fact, David Ayers probably got one of those compilation CDs they used to call, was it the Now That's What I Call Music compilation CDs, and basically took his favorite songs off of there and just threw it in his film, because you're going to be like, man, okay, that's a cool song that I remember. You're going to be singing along as these songs come up, and they come up at integral points to the movie to kind of build up your emotion at that particular part. Not so much with the dialogue and what's going on, but the songs kind of help the movie kind of carry along. So that was a great thing about it. It's always awesome where you got a movie that you remember the music, and this one you'll definitely remember the music as far as the Suicide Squad movie goes. Other things that I did like in this film was Will Smith and Margot Robbie. Deadshot and Harley Quinn were awesome on screen. As a matter of fact, to the point to where without them, this film just would not have worked. And I know if you're a big Suicide Squad fan, you know that those are big characters of the Suicide Squad. But I just think without Will Smith and without Margot Robbie playing those characters, this probably would have felt just like as a flop. I think they did so good in their roles that they embraced the characters. They did such a great job that you stop looking at him as Will Smith, even though he does a lot of Will Smith isms, and you stop looking at it as Margot Robbie. She really took on the fact with the kind of the uber New York accent and the kind of insane personality that Harley Quinn has, and he was the Deadshot of the comic books, where I can't miss, and he's kind of overconfident, so where like you really believe that they were who they were trying to portray on screen. Best parts of this movie as far as the characters go. Other things that I liked about this film are the action scenes. And one of the action scenes you did get to see in the trailer was with Will Smith as Deadshot on top of the car shooting with his little wrist guns. There was a super cool scene. It goes on for a little bit longer, obviously, than what's in the trailer, and it really sets him up as kind of like a badass in this film. So that was awesome. They do have other action scenes that go on with them kind of taking on the villain and little villain's minions. But I will say that they could have probably used some more in this film. Not to say that they're just like that was the one and only action scene. There are others, but for a superhero film, you kind of wanted there to be a lot more. In this one, there was only a few of them. So it's kind of a good and a bad, but that's where we're going to stop as far as the goods of this film. Let's go ahead and talk about the bads, because unfortunately I do have a few of them, because this wasn't the greatest film. It's an okay film, but let's talk about what I didn't like. So one of the things to start off that I didn't like about this film is the villain. I'm not going to spoil who the villain was for you if you haven't seen it, because they really don't establish that in the trailers, but the villain's kind of a twist, I guess. And how do I say this without being spoilerish? The villain is set up. When the villain gets to be the villain in this particular film, you already know the villain's weakness. So I was kind of sitting there like, okay, well, we already know how to beat this. How is this something that is a threat? And then when they try to do that thing, it doesn't work. But then when we actually get towards the end, when they're actually defeating the villain, it's the same thing that they did at the beginning, more or less, that didn't work the first time. So I really didn't get it. I really didn't get the whole end game for the villain. I got the motivation of why the villain was the villain, but I didn't get the whole what was gonna take place when they did what they did and what they were doing to get there. It just kind of was like just doing things because of doing it. So that's the reason why I like the villain. Everything else would be too much spoilers, so I'm not gonna go that far into it. Other things that I did not like about this film was the dialogue. Now, there's not a lot of dialogue in this film. They do some, and maybe it was kind of overtaken by the music and some of the setup of story. But when we actually get to that third act of the film, when they're taking on the villain, the dialogue just got super corny. It's like some young kid or some first-time screenwriter wrote it. But it was just bad. And I kept thinking, I was like, why would you say that? Why would you say that? So I don't know, maybe that was a reshoot thing, or it just wasn't good. It was just stop there. Other things that I didn't like about the film is that it had a lot of the faults of BVS, is that it was too many flashbacks, too much backstory. I know it had a lot of characters, and I said it at the very beginning, is that there was a lot of people in this film, a lot of people in the Suicide Squad. So they were trying to set up a lot of information on these characters, but I felt it was unnecessary, because they tell us how these people get arrested, then they want to tell us the motivations for these characters as well. I don't need the motivations. I just needed I needed more information about Deadshot. I needed more information about Harley Quinn and her relationship with the Joker, and that was it. Everybody else, unfortunately, if you're familiar with Suicide Squad, the team is cannon fodder. Will they survive? Will they not survive? And the team always changes. So why give me a bunch of backstory for people, or a lot of motivations for people, if they may or may not even make it through this, or make it back for a sequel if they intend to do a sequel for it? Because I originally think that they were trying to give us this information because they were going to put these people in a sequel. But that's not how the Suicide Squad works, about having them come back. The only really returning people we normally get is Joel Kinnaman's character of Flag, and Deadshot, and Harley Quinn. Those are the ones that are probably making the most appearances in the Suicide Squad. Everybody else, they're interchangeable. So I didn't get that. I really didn't dig that. It slowed the movie down, and the editing of how they did it, they didn't give it to us all at once. They just kept popping them up as they were moving through the film, which kind of slowed the pace down for a minute. And like I said, maybe it was the reshoots. Maybe it went one way in the beginning, and this reshoots, they re-edited this film, and that's the way they did it. I just didn't like the way they did it. A lot of people talked about the film being messy because of that, and I see why. I definitely see why because of that. Last thing I'm going to give you as far as the things that I thought were bad with this film, and this is just a personal thing. A lot of people really liked his character, but I wasn't a big fan of the interpretation of the Joker in this film. I wasn't a big fan going into this film, so that's why I saved this for a little last, because I did have some bias with it just from the initial photos and the initial trailers. I just wasn't a big fan of the Joker. When I saw it on screen, I walked away with, I didn't hate him as much, but I still don't really enjoy this interpretation of the Joker. I will deal with it, and maybe it's because he didn't have a lot of screen time and I didn't really get to kind of dive into who the Joker was. for me, what they showed us, it's just kind of like, oh, he's just a gangster who dresses up as a clown, and that's not the Joker to me. So it is what it is. But their relationship between him and Harley was really cool. I did like that part. So we'll stop right there with the bads. And overall feelings of this film, it's an okay movie. It's not the 20-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, what it's currently getting right now, or whatever it is. I'll put it up on screen, whatever percentage is at currently. But the film does have problems. It does have problems. I think it does a great job at setting up the characters to branch off the Suicide Squad to appear in Batman films or in the Flash films or in I doubt Superman, because Superman would probably beat everybody quickly, but they can branch out into the DC cinematic universe on their own now. We've established them as characters and villains, and they don't need to be specifically in a Suicide Squad film. So that's a good thing that did come out of this, and probably the best thing that I enjoyed about this film is the setup of the characters, the establishing of the characters. I'm gonna say setup because I didn't like all the backstory. The establishing of the characters themselves. So we got new people to look at as far as the old villains that we're all used to getting in these particular films. So that's my overall film. It's an average film. It's about how I felt about BVS. Maybe because, like I said, it was recut. Maybe there's going to be an ultimate edition that comes out that shows us how it was originally set up and what they originally thought, because there was there's some consistency things that go on, especially with Captain Boomerang, and some scenes that were cut out that were in a trailer that didn't appear in the film. So in whatever ultimate edition that they put out for this film, I'll get to see what that looks like. Should you go out and see it? If you're a comic book fan, you probably already saw it on Thursday night. If you are not a comic book fan, but you do like action films, go out and see this one. This is a cool action film to go see. If you're not super familiar about the Suicide Squad, but just invested in the DC Cinematic Universe, you kind of need to see this one, because they also do some setups for a future film coming out. I'm trying not to spoil that for you, but they do some setup for a future film coming out. I'm not saying which future film, but a future film that comes out. So it's kind of like with Marvel, when they were with Iron Man setting up, they do some stuff like that in this film as well too. So if you're outside of that demographic, maybe you might want to take a pass on this film. But other than that, go out and see the film. It's enjoyable for what it is. It's a popcorn film. You'll walk out saying like, hey, I watched a good action movie, or I watched a decent action movie. I won't say that. So that's all I got for this week on this movie review. Make sure you like and comment below. If you saw Suicide Squad, tell me if you thought it was a fair translation of the Suicide Squad, and if you like this particular film, tell me down below in the comments. I'll definitely discuss it with you, but I guess that's all I got for this week. I'll see you guys next week.